Hottle, the young actress best known for playing Gio in Godzilla vs. Kong and Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, has sadly...
When Paul Walker crashed in 2013, the world assumed he died instantly, but the coroner found soot trapped deep inside his lungs. He was actually breathing as the flames completely engulfed the crushed vehicle. This is the horrifying truth. You know the tragic Hollywood headline. The biggest star of the Fast and Furious franchise died exactly how he lived on screen. He lost his life inside a brutally fast car. But the official police reports tell a much darker, much more terrifying story. The crash happened on November 30th, 2013. Walker attended a Reach Out Worldwide charity event. He spent his weekend raising money for disaster victims in Santa Clarita, California. The afternoon felt completely normal and completely relaxed. He spent the entire day laughing with his closest friends. Before leaving, he took a quick ride with Roger Rodas. Rodas wasn't just his trusted financial advisor. He was a highly skilled professional racing driver. They co-owned a high-performance auto shop together. They climbed into a red 2005 Porsche Carrera GT. That specific vehicle had a terrifying reputation among professional drivers. Porsche actually designed the Carrera GT as a Le Mans prototype race car initially. They scrapped the racing program but decided to sell the car to the public. They kept the massive V10 engine but removed the safety nets. It lacked basic electronic stability controls that modern cars rely on. It was a raw, untamed beast on the pavement. The machine demanded absolute perfection from the person behind the wheel. Even Jay Leno famously spun one out on a professional racetrack. They just wanted to take a quick spin. They drove out into a quiet suburban business park, but they never made it back to the charity event. To understand the horrifying truth of his autopsy, you need to see the street first. What exactly went wrong on that final stretch of asphalt? Let's look closely at the Los Angeles County Sheriff's investigation. The speed limit on Hercules Street was only 45 miles per hour, but investigators discovered Rodas pushed the Porsche well past that legal limit. They estimated the vehicle hit over 100 miles per hour. Suddenly, Rodas lost control of the heavy steering wheel. The vehicle violently spun 180 degrees across the road. It slammed directly into a solid concrete sidewalk curb. Then it snapped a metal light pole entirely in half. Finally, the driver's side crushed aggressively into a massive tree. The sheer force of that impact nearly split the expensive car in half. The violence of the crash was deafening. Co-workers heard the massive crunch from the charity event down the street. They immediately dropped everything and sprinted toward the rising smoke. Roger's young son actually ran toward the chaotic scene. He was completely unaware his father was trapped inside the wreckage. Several brave friends grabbed heavy fire extinguishers. Antonio Holmes reached directly into the intense, rising flames. They desperately tried to pull both men from the crushed metal frame. They emptied extinguisher after extinguisher into the blazing inferno. But the massive fire proved entirely too powerful. They could only stand back in pure shock. Now, here is the detail the media completely ignored. When you watch the security camera footage from across the street, you notice something chilling. The Porsche did not explode on initial impact. A full 60 seconds passed before the heavy smoke became visible. That missing minute changes the entire narrative of the tragedy. What happened inside that crushed vehicle during those 60 seconds? To answer that, we have to examine the car's notorious history again. Why did a professional racing driver lose control on a straight, dry road? Porsche faced massive backlash for the Carrera GT long before this crash. Professional test drivers called the car unforgiving and brutal. It utilized a massive engine mounted right behind the driver's seat. This created a very difficult center of gravity. If the back end slipped, correcting the spin was nearly impossible. Even highly trained drivers struggled to keep it on the pavement. Investigators also found something wrong with the specific tires on Walker's car. They were 9 years old. The rubber had hardened over time. This drastically reduced the vehicle's grip on the asphalt. A dangerous car met ancient tires and extreme speed. It was a recipe for absolute disaster. But the mechanical failures don't explain the medical horror that followed. The world desperately hoped Walker didn't suffer. Fans prayed the blunt force trauma ended his life mercifully on impact. But the official coroner's report destroyed that comfort completely. The truth inside the autopsy file is incredibly difficult to hear. We're going to break down the medical examiner's exact findings next. The Los Angeles County autopsy report is completely unforgiving. Roger Rodas suffered severe blunt head, neck, and chest trauma. The medical examiner stated he died rapidly from those massive injuries. His death was practically instantaneous when the car struck the tree. But the findings for Paul Walker revealed a much darker reality. Walker suffered a fractured left jawbone. He broke his collarbone, his pelvis, and his spine. However, the initial high-speed crash did not end his life immediately. The medical examiner found soot trapped deep inside Walker's trachea. You only breathe soot into your lungs if you are actively taking breaths. You must be inhaling during an active fire. This singular, devastating medical detail proves the most horrifying theory. Paul Walker survived the initial impact. He was alive while the flames slowly engulfed the passenger side. He was physically trapped inside the crushed metal frame. His broken pelvis and spine made escaping the wreckage completely impossible. The heat inside the vehicle quickly reached unimaginable temperatures. Authorities found his body resting in a pugilistic stance. That is a defensive physical posture extremely common in severe fire victims. The intense heat causes the muscles to violently contract and pull inward. It makes the victim look like a boxer shielding their face. He burned entirely beyond recognition. The coroner required dental records just to confirm his official identity. The report listed his cause of death as combined traumatic and thermal injuries. He was trapped in a nightmare for those final 60 seconds. He fought for his life until the very last possible breath. You can genuinely feel the absolute weight of that terrible afternoon. It shatters the Hollywood illusion of a quick, cinematic exit. The horrific details devastated his family, his castmates, and millions of fans. The sheriff's department eventually ruled the tragic incident a pure accident. They found absolutely zero drugs or alcohol in either man's system. They didn't find any evidence of foul play or intentional sabotage. 2 years later, Walker's daughter Meadow took serious legal action. She filed a wrongful death lawsuit directly against Porsche. She blamed dangerous design flaws for her father's untimely death. Her lawyers argued the car lacked a proper crash survival system. They also targeted the missing electronic stability control. Porsche defended their vehicle aggressively in the media. They blamed the old tires and the reckless speed of the driver. Eventually, the two sides settled the painful legal battle privately out of court. But the legacy of Paul Walker completely outlived the wreckage. The tragedy completely halted production on Furious 7. The studio didn't know how to move forward without their leading man, but Paul's brothers, Caleb and Cody, stepped up to help. They served as physical stand-ins to finish his remaining action scenes. The visual effects team seamlessly blended Paul's face onto their bodies. This allowed the franchise to give Brian O'Connor a proper, respectful send-off. The final scene featured the song "See You Again" by Wiz Khalifa. It became a massive global anthem for grief and remembrance. He wasn't just a guy who jumped cars out of airplanes on screen. He spent his final hours raising money to help desperate people. His Reach Out Worldwide Foundation continues operating today. They still provide massive disaster relief globally in his honor. His character drove off into the sunset, finding the peace he deserved. This story proves exactly how fast everything can change. One quick drive down a familiar California street ended a beautiful life. The coroner's report is brutal, but it reveals the complete truth. Did you know he survived that initial violent impact? Tell me your honest reaction down in the comments below. Subscribe right now if you want more verified, deep-dive celebrity stories every week. Click the video on your screen for another shocking Hollywood breakdown. I'll see you in the next one.